Have you ever walked through your house at night and felt something was off? Not scary, just wrong. A cold shift in the air. A silence that pressed against your ears. A feeling like someone was already watching you from the dark. Tonight's video is about those moments. 3 true stories, told by the very people who lived them. Each one started with a normal night, and ended with a truth most people refuse to believe: evil doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes, it sleeps under the bed. Sometimes, it speaks from behind the walls. And sometimes, it laughs just outside your child's door. In Story 1, a night shift officer answers a routine scream call and finds a predator hiding inches beneath his boots. In Story 2, a tenant's whispered warning leads police to discover cult-like figures literally living inside the walls. And in Story 3, a woman with blood on her hands and a doll in her lap forces one officer to confront madness, grief, and something far darker. These stories are real, and they all happened at night when most people were asleep, and only a few were still awake enough to notice. So grab your headphones, turn off the lights, and ask yourself, are you really alone in the dark? Story 1. The Scream in the Night, a night shift officer's tale. Most of the time, being a night shift cop in a suburban town means handling noise complaints, maybe chasing off a drunk or two from a gas station parking lot. It's boring, repetitive, and you start to believe you've seen it all. Until a night comes along that breaks you. A night that reminds you, evil doesn't knock, it hides. It was late October in Bergen County, New Jersey. A cold, overcast night. I was about halfway through my shift when dispatch came in. Report of a scream heard from a residence. Unknown if domestic or medical. Not an uncommon call. Probably a couple fighting, I thought. Maybe someone tripped in the shower and spooked the neighbors. But something about the voice on the radio made my stomach tighten. There was a pause, like the dispatcher didn't want to say what they were thinking. I drove out to the location, a quiet residential street. The kind with trimmed lawns, hanging porch lights, and cars parked neatly in driveways. But this house was different. It was dark. No porch light, no visible movement. Just a single blue van in the driveway, parked slightly crooked like someone had come home in a hurry. I knocked, waited, knocked again, louder. Nothing. A man stepped out from the house next door, nervous, pale, clutching his phone like it was a weapon. He said, I heard a woman scream, like she was being killed. It was just once. Then, nothing. I nodded, told him to go back inside. Then I circled the property, flashlight sweeping each window. All locked, except one in the back, slightly open, just wide enough for someone to slip through. That's when I called for backup, but I didn't wait. I climbed in through the window and landed in a small kitchen. It was quiet, too quiet. You don't notice how loud a house can be, creaking walls, buzzing lights until all of it is gone. This one felt dead. I swept the downstairs. Nothing. Then came the stairs, carpeted, narrow. Each step let out a low groan beneath my boots. At the top, I found a long hallway. The air was colder up there, like the heating had been turned off for days. A single door at the end was cracked open. I raised my light and pushed it gently. Inside, a woman lay motionless in bed. Covers pulled up to her chest. One side of the blanket was soaked in blood, thick, dark, still wet. For a second, I thought she was dead. Then her chest moved. Barely. I rushed to her side, checked her pulse. Weak, but there. She'd been stabbed. Multiple times. She needed help now. I reached for my radio, and that's when I heard it. A soft rustling, directly beneath me. I froze, slowly crouched, and looked under the bed. 2 eyes stared back at me. A man, curled in the darkness, wearing a black ski mask, his chest rising and falling with labored breaths. He didn't flinch, just watched me, like a predator waiting for the right second to strike. I drew my weapon and backed away. "Show me your hands. Now." He didn't move. I repeated myself louder. Finally, he slid out from under the bed, slow and deliberate like he'd done this before. He stood, tall, tense, covered in sweat. I kept my weapon trained on him until backup burst through the front door and took over. They cuffed him on the bedroom floor. Later we found out everything. He was her boyfriend. They had a history, breakups, jealousy, a restraining order she never followed through on. That night he'd broken in through the back window, waited upstairs while she slept, and attacked her in a blind rage when she refused to talk. He'd stabbed her, then hid under the bed listening to her bleed, planning to run the moment he heard sirens. But he hadn't counted on the neighbor calling so fast, or me coming in alone. She survived. Barely. They said if I'd shown up even 5 minutes later, she'd be dead. I didn't sleep for 3 days after that. Every creak in my own home felt like footsteps. Every shadow under the bed made my stomach twist. That night taught me something people don't like to think about. Monsters don't always break down your door. Sometimes, they wait in silence, right under your feet. Story 2. The Walls Whisper, a night patrol's haunting discovery. Most nights patrolling the city feels routine. Graffiti complaints, noise violations, the occasional call about someone wandering too close to the dumpsters. You move through the shift, half awake, eyes open, but your mind coasting. But every so often, something shatters that rhythm. Something that follows you home, sits with you in silence, and whispers when the house is dark. This was one of those nights. It started with a welfare check. A landlord from an older apartment complex called dispatch, saying he was worried about a tenant. A man named Adam, mid-30s, quiet, lived alone. He said Adam hadn't been answering his door for days. But the neighbors heard strange noises mumbling at night, water running non-stop, heavy objects being dragged across the floor. So my partner and I were sent to check it out. When we arrived, it was around 3 a.m. The building was run down, the kind where every hallway bulb flickers just enough to mess with your eyes. We walked up the stairs, and that's when we heard it. The sound of rushing water. We followed it to the 3rd floor. Adam's apartment door was shut, but water was pouring out from under it like the place was flooding from the inside. We knocked. No answer. Then we forced entry. The smell hit us immediately, mildew, rot, something deeper, like wet drywall and decay. Inside, every faucet in the apartment was on. Kitchen sink, bathroom sink, bathtub, even the washing machine overflowing onto the floor. The carpet squished beneath our boots. And in the center of it, all standing barefoot in the kitchen, water up to his ankles, was Adam. He was shivering, wearing nothing but soaked pajama pants. His eyes were distant, glassy, like he hadn't slept in days. He didn't react when we called his name. Didn't even flinch when we approached. He just stood there, whispering, "They live in the walls. They live in the walls." Over and over, like a broken record. We turned off the water, called for medical support. We thought it was a mental breakdown, maybe schizophrenia, maybe drugs. But then, something changed. While we were checking the rooms for damage, I noticed something strange in the bedroom. A wall that didn't look quite right. It had a faint line across it, like it had been patched over. But the color was just a shade too light, like it hadn't aged with the rest of the paint. I tapped on it. Hollow. I called my partner in. We moved a shelf, then peeled at the edges of the wall. and found a small rectangular hatch about 3 feet high. When we opened it, we expected a maintenance space. Instead, we found people. 3 of them, crammed into a crawl space just behind the wall, pale, thin, eyes wide open. Their faces painted white with black rings around their eyes and mouths like some sick caricature of clowns or spirits. They didn't scream. They didn't blink. They just stared like we were the intruders. For a moment, none of us moved. Even the air felt like it froze. Then they started whispering, in unison, words we couldn't understand. Mouths twitching in sync like a ritual, like they had done this before. We detained them immediately. They didn't resist, barely reacted. Later we learned they were part of an obscure cult that believed in dwelling within the spirit layer, whatever that means. They had no IDs, no fingerprints in the system, just blank stares and silence. Adam had met one of them months earlier at a bus stop. He was lonely, depressed, easy to manipulate. They started visiting him, then staying, eventually moving in, not into the apartment, but into the walls. They spoke to him through the vents, moved things when he slept, told him he was chosen, that the world outside was poisoned and only the inside was sacred. He believed them. Or maybe he just needed to believe in something. That's why he turned on all the water. He said it was the only thing that kept their voices away. After that night, Adam was taken into psychiatric care. The 3 cult members. They disappeared during transport. No joke. The report said the van crashed during a heavy rainstorm, when officers regained consciousness. The restraints were broken, and the 3 were gone. To this day, no trace of them has ever been found. And sometimes, when I'm alone in my house at night and I hear the soft creak of a wall expanding in the dark, I wonder, what if they're still hiding, just waiting for another vulnerable mind? Story 3. Nightmare on the Streets of Miami. The Madwoman Hunt. If you've ever worked night patrol in Miami, you know the heat isn't the only thing that creeps under your skin. There's something about the humidity, the way the streets never quite sleep. Even at 3 a.m., the city breathes in shadows. That night, I was paired with Officer Delgado. We'd just finished dealing with a drunk tourist fight on Ocean Drive when the call came in. It was a disturbance. A woman reportedly moving from house to house, banging on doors, screaming incoherently. The dispatcher's voice was tight-clipped, like she was holding something back. Then she added, "She's demanding blood." That got our attention. The first call had come from an elderly couple. They said a barefoot woman had approached their home, knocked 4 times, then began laughing. Not just any laugh, a deep, guttural cackle that didn't sound human. When they didn't answer, she stared at their doorbell camera and whispered something they couldn't hear, before vanishing into the dark. Then the second call came in. Another house. Same description. This time the homeowner had footage. We watched it from the dash of our cruiser. The woman had wild, uncombed hair. She wore a torn hospital gown soaked and clinging to her skin. Her face was off. Her eyes wide, manic, unblinking. She leaned into the lens nose, nearly touching it, and whispered, "Open up. He's hungry. He needs blood." Then she laughed again, slow, drawn out, like she was enjoying a private joke, one only she understood. The report said she was holding something behind her back. We coordinated a quick search, looping around the neighborhood with our spotlight. No sign of her, until another call came in. Break-in in progress. Delgado and I were 2 blocks away. When we arrived, the front door was wide open, but not broken in, just unlocked. Inside, the air felt heavy, No sounds except a faint buzz of a ceiling fan somewhere upstairs. The homeowners, a couple in their late 30s, were huddled near the kitchen, clearly in shock. The wife pointed toward the stairs. "She's up there," she whispered. "She was sitting on our bed." We moved carefully, weapons drawn. Every step creaked on the staircase. The hallway smelled faintly of iron and something damp like dirty rainwater and old clothes. We reached the master bedroom. The door was open, and there she was, sitting cross-legged in the center of the bed, back straight, smiling. In one hand, a knife, long serrated, dripping red. Her arm was cut open from wrist to elbow. Blood soaked the sheets around her, and at her feet, a small porcelain doll, stained, cracked, its tiny mouth painted red. She looked at us and whispered, "He's still thirsty." We tried to talk to her, calm her down. She didn't blink, didn't move. She just kept petting the doll like it was alive, whispering to it, telling it things in a childlike voice. Delgado stepped forward. That's when she snapped. She screamed, high-pitched and raw, and lunged straight at me with the knife. I fired. 2 shots sent her mass, but angled for her shoulder, enough to drop her without ending her life. She collapsed on the floor, twitching, still laughing through bloodied lips. We disarmed and restrained her. Even as paramedics carried her out on the stretcher, she kept whispering, over and over, "He needs more. He needs more." Later at the hospital, we learned she had escaped from a psychiatric facility across town. Her name was Carla Ramirez. She had a long history of paranoid schizophrenia compounded by severe postpartum psychosis. She'd lost a child 2 years earlier. The doll had belonged to him. They said she hadn't spoken a word in weeks, until that night. Since then, she's been under permanent psychiatric care, heavily medicated. No visitors allowed. But here's the part that sticks with me. One of the homeowners, the wife, told us that their child had woken up just minutes before the break-in, crying uncontrollably. He never did that, she said. She went to check on him and saw the woman standing just outside the nursery door, watching. Had we arrived just 5 minutes later, I still don't like to finish that sentence. 3 stories, 3 lives forever changed, but all sharing one simple truth. The scariest things don't always happen in haunted houses. They happen on quiet streets, in modest apartments, behind nursery doors. They hide in crawl spaces, crouch under beds, whisper through vents, and most terrifying of all, they're human, or at least, they used to be. Tonight you've heard from officers, men who've stared directly into the eyes of madness, who've pulled victims out of nightmares most people wouldn't believe if they saw them in a movie. And even they still carry the weight. So the next time you hear a thump in your hallway, a creak in the walls, a laugh echoing through the stillness, before you brush it off, before you blame it on your imagination, remember what you've just heard, because monsters don't always knock. Sometimes they let themselves in and wait. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. If you enjoy true terrifying stories like these, leave a like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss the next warning. And if you have a story like this, a night you can't forget, a moment where the darkness almost swallowed you, tell us in the comments, because your story might be the next one we share. Stay safe, stay awake, and never ignore a whisper in the night.